Welcome to Kind Community Conversations Behind the Screen. Kind Community's primary focus is empowering and supporting youth, recognizing and fostering kindness in young people, both to themselves and to others, which creates a ripple effect. Tonight's conversation supports this and is part of our core mission. We are thankful for our partnership with School District 25, and in particular wish to extend our gratitude to Courtney Fisher and Tanya Wilkes. We can't thank you enough for your tireless dedication to supporting this mission and our partnership. Finally, before I introduce tonight's moderator, we would like to thank our panel members for tonight's conversation. We are fortunate to have experts in their fields discussing important issues facing our children. Tonight's moderator is Holly Lacey, Pocatello High School's Vice Principal. Holly is an educational leader and administrator known for her dedication to fostering holistic student development and creating thriving educational communities. As the vice principal at Pocatello High School, Holly brings a wealth of experience from a diverse career spanning counseling, education administration, and professional leadership. Holly's unwavering dedication to education is marked by her compassionate approach, steadfast work ethic, and a deep belief in the transformative power of education. She maintains an open and approachable demeanor, fostering an atmosphere where every student feels valued and supported. Holly Lacey's journey is a testament to her unyielding commitment to fostering an environment of growth, empowerment, and academic excellence. As vice principal at Pocatello High School, she continues to shape the future of students and the broader educational landscape. Please welcome Holly.
That felt very official, and so I'm hoping that they will introduce themselves just as officially. So I'm going to give an opportunity for each panel member to introduce themselves.
Good evening. I'm Nick Edwards. I am the Chief Investigator at the Idaho Office of the Attorney General, and I've currently been assigned as the ICAC Commander, which is the Internet Crimes Against Children. I've been in law enforcement for about 20 years. I started my career in law enforcement here in Pocatello. I was with the Pocatello Police Department for about 16 years. I was a school resource officer at Irving Middle School, at Century High School. So this is kind of home. My wife was a school teacher here in District 25, so this is home for me, but good to be back.
Hi, I am Dr. Kendra Westerhouse. I am a psychologist who works with children, adolescents, and their families at Health West, which is based out of here in Pocatello, but is now in 3 states. And we have partnerships with School District 25, which is a great thing that we're able to do. I have worked with lots of kids over the years of varying ages, and really tried to work within the family unit to figure out what's going to be best for that particular family and situation.
I'm Jake Johnson. I'm a corporal with the Pocatello Police Department. I'm currently at Century High School as their school resource officer. I've been in law enforcement for 27 years, most of that with Bingham County and Pocatello.
I am Amy Prescott. I'm the current principal at New Horizon, the district's alternative school that houses first grade through 12th grade. I've been a principal for 19 years, and prior to that, I taught for 8 years.
I'm Matt Olson, and I'm the director of Bannock County Juvenile Justice. I've served in that role for over 25 years, but have been in the juvenile justice field for about 30 years. We work very closely with school district, really focus on providing services to the court and working closely with families and youth who, for some reason, have had challenges or experienced a level of delinquency.
I'm Anson Call. I am the magistrate judge for Bannock County that's assigned to handle child protection and juvenile justice related cases. I've been in that position for a little over 2 years now, and prior to taking that position, I was the prosecuting attorney for Bannock County over in American Falls for quite some years, and got to do a lot with juvenile justice, working with the ICAC team and different things like that as well at that point in my career. And that's me.
Okay, we are going to turn the time over to Nick Edwards, and he is going to present for us. And then we will open it up for some different questions that we have that will follow up on what he's presented.
Okay, I'll try not to go for an hour and a half. I'll be quick, I promise.
Our goal.
Can you hear me okay? Is that working? All right. So slide deck, there's PowerPoint, you can see this. Most of this information is actually obtained through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and just stats and data that we've learned at the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force here in Idaho. A lot of people don't know what we do or how we're set up or how we even get cases, and so that's the first thing we want to talk about is some myths out there and some facts. So the first myth out there is that child sexual abuse material, or what we call CSAM, offenders and hands-on child sex offenders are two distinct groups of offenders. The fact is that CSAM offender is more likely than not to have already committed hands-on offenses. Another myth, communities are aware of most of the sexual offending that occurs. The fact is that most communities aren't aware of what is out there as far as CSAM, and it's one of the most underreported, undetected crimes that are out there. The myth is that being sexually abused as a child increases the likelihood of later being sexually offended against children or sexually offending against children. The myth is that there is no correlation. So this is something that we've seen generations that have stopped. So just because you're sexually abused doesn't mean that you will do that when you're older. So understanding the ICAC task force in Idaho and how we're set up, this graph kind of depicts this. So federally, ESP providers or internet providers are required by federal law to report if somebody is downloading, uploading, sharing, or enticing what we call child sexual abuse material. Federally, the internet providers and the social media sites that are out there have to report it. They don't have a choice. It's federally mandated. And so with a question I often get is like, so they're watching what I'm looking at online? Absolutely, somebody's watching what you're doing online, no question. So AT&T, Comcast, all of those up there that you see, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're all reporting when they believe somebody is accessing, downloading, uploading, sharing child sexual abuse material. Even if you're chatting about it with somebody, enticing a child, it gets reported, and it all gets reported, as you can see, to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So and we call that NECMEC. It's an acronym for National Missing and Exploited Children. So everything gets reported to NECMEC. They are the clearinghouse for all of these things that get reported. Once it gets reported, NECMEC tries to figure out where it came from. So there are 61 total task forces across the country. Actually, before I jump into that, of all of those up there that are, you see all the different social media sites and internet providers, who do you think is the #1 reporter in the state of Idaho? I think it's kind of fascinating. I didn't realize this until I took this position. What's that?
Snapchat.
Absolutely, it's Snapchat, 100%. It's Snapchat, which is unique to Idaho. It's not the same for every state. We're unique. Snapchat's #1 reporter. Closely behind that is Reddit, believe it or not, for Idaho. Again, those vary from state to state and task force to task force, but so we're one of 61 task forces, and our job, I won't read that whole slide, but our job at the task force is to figure out where that actual, what we call cyber tip, happened in the state of Idaho. So 61 task forces, we're one of 61. We get everything that they believe happened in Idaho. We have to figure out where it happened in Idaho, and then what we're gonna do with it. So we call these cyber tips. Every day we get cyber tips that come into our office that get sent to us from NECMEC. My task force in Idaho is very unique and different than any other state. Most states do not operate, all states, nobody operates like we do. So what I mean by that is the state of Idaho has found that this is a valuable thing for us to be, funding and doing. And so the Idaho legislators have given us funding to basically bring on affiliate investigators where the Attorney General's office pays for the salary of those investigators around the state. So you can see up here, I have investigators throughout the state of Idaho. We have one here in Pocatello. Her name is Irina Leach. She's our Pocatello Police Department task force affiliate. She works ICAC crimes 100% of the time, and we pay that salary at the Attorney General's office. So this is how we're set up, and you can see we've got investigators all over the state, from North Idaho to the Boise Valley, over here to East Idaho. So we're very fortunate. No other ICAC task force across the country is set up like this. You can see right here, this is also kind of gives you an idea of those cyber tips that I talked about that we get in daily. That's the column on the right-hand side. So this is last year's cyber tips. Idaho received 2,400 cyber tips in the course of a year. And you can see how we compare to other states. And the column that says FTE, that's full-time employees, how many full-time investigators we have working. ICAC cases. We are uniquely different than any other state. Again, because I think in Idaho we prioritize this, right? This is a priority for parents, for families, keeping our kids safe is the #1 priority, and we've clearly demonstrated that with some of this stuff. So kind of unique to look around. You look at some of the cyber tips that are up there. You know, states like Illinois, they get 16,000 cyber tips a year. They have 18 full-time employees working ICAC, so I don't even know how they maintain. That's a lot. So we're doing quite well in regards to that. This is what we've received thus far in cyber tips that we get at the Attorney General's office. So every day they come in. We get on average about 60 a week is what we get. They're broke down. So you see the number of cyber tips that we receive. To date, we're right around, or through July, we have 1,900 cyber tips. So we're on track to actually almost double what we got last year. So this trend of internet crimes against children is not going away. In fact, it's rapidly increasing. It is a new thing, and it's getting worse. Of the 1,900 that we get, you can see that we closed 987 of those. And when I mean closed, this is where the topic gets a little, a little rough. We close them for a number of reasons. I have 3 analysts full-time that look at every single cyber tip that comes in. They look at whatever was downloaded, uploaded, shared, viewed, and they determine, those three analysts determine whether or not they think a crime was committed, or if there needs to be further investigation, or if there's not anything we can do with it, meaning maybe the video or the photo is what we consider age difficult, right? Are we talking about a 18-year-old child, or are we talking about a 15-year-old child? And they get closed for those reasons. We then assign out 413 cyber tips. That's what we've assigned out this year thus far. And thus far, up through July, we've made 36 arrests, and that's statewide. These cases take a long time. They're super intensive with search warrants and court paperwork, affidavits, preservation letters, things like that. So they take a long time to work these cases, but that's where we're at through this year. I will tell you that we have doubled the number of arrests, almost doubled the number of arrests that we made last year to this year. So a lot of changes have taken place. Some good things happening as far as the enforcement side of it. There's the trends. I talked about those a little bit. You can see in 2013, all year we received 223 of these. The trend now, we're going to be upwards of 4,000 cyber tips by the end of the year is what we project. 300% increase in the last 5 years, internet crimes. So this is the problem with a new digital world. These are the problems that come with it, right? You have all sorts of things: cyberbullying, sexual exploitation, sextortion, enticement, and then tactics such as catfishing and blackmailing. I won't spend a lot of time on those. But I will tell you that probably the latest trend in what we're seeing as far as sextortion cases, teenage boys are being the most common targets of those things. And so whether they're being pressured to share or create, or maybe an AI generated image is being created, and then the teenage boys are the ones that are being targeted. And that's difficult, right? We can talk about why those are often unreported as well. I'm sure there's lots of people on this panel that could help me with that. So this is an example of a financial sextortion case that we recently came across. I won't read that specifically. I'll let you take a few minutes and read that, but it's an example of how AI is being used as a weapon, right, against our kids. Lots of ways to report sextortion cases. This is a flyer that we have out there. We distribute these. So really the big one is that we're asking, if you have a child or somebody that comes to you and is willing to disclose that this is happening, there are resources available. We can talk about that more. But wanted to give you an idea of this is absolutely available for parents, educators, to find help, and then resources to help them combat that. And these are things that we're actually going after criminals and charging for this type of stuff. AI is the new hot topic. We'll talk about AI for just a second. This last year, we had Idaho legislators that put forth a House bill to help us combat the AI world. This is on the left-hand side. There's actually a free AI imaging generator website. Anybody can access this, and I actually went on here one day and I just typed in, you can type in anything in here. And like, for example, I typed in like cop eating a donut, fat cop eating a donut, and it absolutely just it generates an AI image for you. The interesting thing about when you jumped onto here is this actually said, right when you logged on, if you try to search, a child or something like that, or seek that, they will report it to NCMEC. It'll actually give you a label warning, but it still will not stop that website from actually generating the image. So pretty dangerous out there. It's pretty open for the public, but these also are increasingly happening. We're seeing these cases all over Idaho, even today. So the AI House Bill 465 came through. It was passed by all the legislators, and the governor signed this into law. It took effect July 1. It did a couple of things for us. One of the things that it did is it categorized a couple of categories of child sexual abuse material for us. It granted immunity to law enforcement, which was one of the things that needed to be cleaned up. And then it clarified some of the jurisdiction for the Attorney General's office. Basically, without reading into these Idaho code, the Idaho Code 1507, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but all that to be said, AI-generated images, we don't, in Idaho, look at them any different than an actual image of child pornography or child sexual abuse material. They're one and the same. If it was generated with AI, it's still the same. It's still a felony in the state of Idaho, whether it's AI-generated or whether it's, I see an actual photo because I don't believe AI's pulling from somewhere. They're still photos. They're still coming from somewhere. So a graphic image of a child sexual abuse material is real, is real, is real. Somewhere along the way, there was a child being victim. So I don't see them as different in any way. And at this point, neither does the law, which is great for the state of Idaho. I will also say that we're one of the first states. There's a few others that have done this. And so that's just another testament to what Idaho does. And the citizens, like, we want to see this. We want to keep our kids safe. Super great law for the state of Idaho. Lots of options for as far as the ICAC task force. We have so many things available for teachers, for law enforcement, for parents, for kids. We have presentations that are canned that we can help with targeting ages between 3rd and 5th grade, right? This topic can be sensitive, and so we're aware of that. And the message isn't the same depending on the age of the child. And so we've got 3 different canned presentations that we're happy to send to anybody that needs these resources. 3rd to 5th grade is one, that should say middle school aged, and then we have a teen adult education one as well that provides some information on where to go if you end up with a problem. So also lots of resources for law enforcement as far as training and equipment. We can help with that stuff. Lots of pamphlets and flyers. I guess I'll end and then certainly turn it back over to Holly, but the Attorney General, this is his task force. By state statute, the Idaho ICAC task force is his. And then he hires people like myself to run the task force and to manage it. But at the end of the day, it's his. And I will tell you, it's his highest priority is keeping kids safe in Idaho. And so with that, that's what I've got. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And then I'll let you pass that as people want to speak.
Okay.
I think where we start tonight is what role do we believe social media is playing and the platforms are playing in our youth and that we have worked with. And I think we'll start and kind of go top down and maybe start with Judge Call. And if you can talk a little bit about what you've seen, and then we can all piggyback into that since we have a variety of areas that we're working in.
Well, we see a lot of different ways in which our kids face challenges through internet access. We've seen everything from a lot of the stuff that Nick was talking to us about, internet crimes against children, sexual exploitation of kids through the internet, things like that. But the kids also face a lot of other challenges online, things dealing with social media and interactions that they have there. Cyberbullying, it's just a different world than a lot of us grew up in, where a kid can't get away from bullying because they're involved in social media all the time, and when they go home, they don't get away from it, and it follows them. So those are some challenges that have been really difficult for kids, and that we're trying to work with them on. Trying to, let's see, other challenges that they face. We've seen kids committing crimes, other types of crimes, using the internet, social media, trying to get, for now I'll just label contraband, all sorts of contraband. things that they're not allowed to have, either because they're completely illegal to possess in Idaho or because of their age, it's illegal for them to have them. Organizing transactions and things like that. So all kinds of different things. The beauty of the internet and cell phones, and the scariest, most terrifying thing about it, is that we walk around with the world in our hands, access to everything all the time. And there's a lot of kids in our community that walk around with that as well, and are really struggling to figure out how to manage that, how to deal with all of that information at once, and the access to all of those things. So I guess I'll leave it there and come back around later.
Yeah.
Well, Judge Call and I work with a lot of the same kids, so a lot of similarities. But what I would add is, one thing social media does, particularly for kids who are on it a lot, is it allows them to conceal interactions that they're having with other peers and other people that have a negative impact on them. And so in addition to engaging sometimes in illegal and delinquent behavior on those social media platforms, what we notice obviously is there's a lot of negative interactions. We start to see kids being impacted by that in terms of whether increased symptoms of depression, anxiety, irritability, agitation, just a lot of unstable mood. What our kids want, and I think most adolescents want, is they want acceptance and they want to belong. And so when they get engaged in social media platforms, oftentimes they're finding groups where they feel like they can get acceptance and where they feel like they can fit in. And then we see them start to adjust and change their values based on the groups that they get engaged with and involved in. So if they're in the right group, just like they might be in the community, that can be a helpful thing. But once they start to get engaged in negative peer groups and negative interactions, those are often concealed, very secretive. It can become very confusing for parents to know what's happening in their child's life in that situation. And then we really start to see those changes in mood and behavior.
I think we see everything that you just said. I think when you think about school, most people think about just kids being on their phone, so they're not doing their work and they're not academically engaged, and that's one piece of it. But we see just what you were talking about that mood regulation, and they get on their phone and they get in an argument with somebody that's there, or they get in an argument with somebody that's not there. And so just a huge flux in mood, and you can tell they'll be in class where they don't have access to their phones, and then they go to lunch and all of a sudden, huge mood swings, and you're like, what's happening? And they're arguing with somebody on their phone, or they saw something on social media that upset them. And so it's not just about engaging in academic work, it's also about helping them regulate their way through the day with the access to everything that they've got in their hand. So.
I think one of the challenges that we're facing is, for years we've taught our kids stranger danger, and if I was to walk up to your house tonight and just walk in, sit down at the dinner table, you would probably be calling the police or telling me to get out. And every night when our kids go home, they're getting online on social media and on these chat groups, and they're letting these strangers right into your house and to talk to our greatest things in our lives, our children. And they're talking to everybody across the nation, across the world, and they don't know who they're talking to. And it goes back to the acceptance and everything else. If they can get that acceptance from somebody and that positive impact from somebody, and they're not getting it from home or from school or from somewhere else, they'll find it online. And that's why we're losing a lot of our children today to the social media and that kind of stuff.
Can I say ditto? Is that okay? I think I agree with everything I've heard, especially those things about kids really looking for that belonging, acceptance. The word I'm thinking of is connection too. And for some kids who feel isolated for various reasons, they may be able to connect better with someone in a different community than their home community. And so there are important roles for social media, for the internet. And I think it's worth acknowledging the double-edged sword that we have here, right? Where there are these ways of reaching out and being connected with people, like-minded people, and there are huge dangers. And I think that we need to just keep in mind that there's more access to information than there used to be, more access to social connections than there used to be. Some of these things are good, right? But, thank you very much. But We also have all of the dangers that go along with it, not knowing who's actually on the other end, letting strangers into our home. Some of the data that psychologists love is things about especially adolescent girls who are on social media more have higher rates of depression. We know that there are tons of accounts out there about even like eating disorders, and there are kids as young as 9 or 10 that are following 3 or more of those sites. So there's some really scary statistics there as well. So we have to acknowledge that there's good and bad.
I'm wondering if you'll go a little bit deeper into the psychological impacts that you're seeing in the population that you're working with.
Yeah, so I see kids of all ages. And so sometimes we hear about in adolescence things like cyberbullying and things like that. Really interesting, the question of where most of the reports come from in Idaho. As I've been preparing for this panel, I've been talking to my teenage patients who I see, like what I should impart. And my plan was to come here and say, there's not really one app that's good or bad. And one of my teenage patients today said, oh, no, it's Snapchat. So they know. We hear about the things that people are saying. I think these advances in technology allow like location finding and things like that too, even within Snapchat and some other apps. And that can be very dangerous for kids too, just people knowing where they're at. In younger kids, we're seeing more of this emotional dysregulation that was mentioned, but related to even like video game playing. But those video games now are tied into social things too. And it's just such a different world. I was giving the example the other day of when I was a kid, the games were like Super Mario Kart and Duck Hunt, right? So aging myself. And so when you're playing Duck Hunt, you're watching this cartoon looking duck come up on the screen and you're waiting for it, and then you're like, there it is, and that's the excitement, and you take your shot at it. Now the games are developed in such a way that the excitement is all the time. There's no waiting, there's no downtime, there's no end goal, there's no losing lives and having to start over. So it's this continuous cycle that kids are engaged in. And this research I have not been able to find yet, but it seems like that's related to some of this emotional dysregulation, just how this has changed so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think what we start with is we talk about the stats, we talk about the effects, and then where we move from here is really what I think parents want to hear is what are the tools, what are the signs, what are the tips, and I'm wondering if there's anything else that you want to share in what you're seeing either at the high school level or in mental health or the juvenile justice level, or once we hit the state level with these. Is there a common pattern or theme that you're seeing with students right now? Is it mostly Snapchat? Is there a typical crime that you're seeing that you're working with, Judge Call?
Just real quick, I'll just add to the Snapchat question and the video gaming. I would tell you that the sextortion stuff statistically is coming to the teenage boys, and it's coming through gaming. That's where it's coming through. So that's how they're being contacted. That's how it's happening. And as far as the Snapchat, I don't believe without the proper settings on a Snapchat, if you have a teenage daughter that has a Snapchat, I promise you she has been confronted or contacted or reached out to by someone she does not know. That has happened. There's no question. And so when we start talking about tools, what do we do? Yeah, I mean, we say educate your children, make them aware, make sure you can control, maybe it's controlling those settings. Maybe your child has gone down the road and done something that they shouldn't have done and actually connected and then shared something. So now how do we put that cat back in the bag? There are resources available. There's a website called Take It Down. NECMEC helps kids pull stuff off of the internet all the time that they may have gotten out there, images that may have been generated via AI. So there are resources available to them to pull that kind of stuff down. But yeah, Snapchat and you talk about sextortion, it's coming from the video gaming. Great point.
I want to add something. So kind of based off of what you said too, the idea that if something does go wrong or if there is something that's presented to a kid that doesn't feel right, having a relationship with your kids where they can come to you with that is like the most important thing. Because, and this was another quote from one of my lovely teenagers that I see, strict parents raise sneaky kids. So we want to have guidelines, we want to have things in place, but you also need to be approachable so that if they get themselves in a jam, they feel like they can tell you and you can be a team together to solve it.
And I'd say to go along with that, at night, be the strict parent and the phone goes with you. If they have the phone in their room, there's nothing good going on with that phone.
Yeah, no, I agree. We talk about that a lot. And then and then the sleep deprivation that comes with it, and then the emotional things that happen at school the next day. And but phones keep a lot of kids up, probably a lot of adults too.
And I was going to talk a little bit to the sleep disturbance. When you look at surveys, and there's a lot of them out there that try to estimate how much time do kids spend on their phone for social reasons. Some of those surveys are estimating up to 9 hours a day spending time on their phones, mainly for social reasons. And a lot of that can be at night when they're unsupervised. And so I think there's a lot of information to educate parents about different carriers and what you can do to put controls and guides on the phone. Kids are just as educated on what they can do to get around those things. And so really, I think one of the key things is once you give a youth a phone, that you set the expectations of what those conditions are. And as parents, we have to educate ourselves on what are our tools and resources we can use to enforce those guidelines. So what happens when a youth won't turn in their phone? What options do I have when I say you need to turn your phone in at 10 o'clock at night and they refuse? Putting controls about how much time they can spend on the internet. A lot of parents we deal with, I've seen some very proactive parents that know all those resources of what they can do to put limitations on those phones. And there's a lot of parents that are still trying to learn or need to learn what those limitations are and restrictions that they can place on the phones. But setting that contract and that expectation up front can really help reduce the conflict and the arguments later on down the road when we set guidelines of here's the expectations regarding your cell phone use, and you have that agreement in place. It can make a big difference to reduce that conflict.
I think helping parents feel empowered that you can make some of these decisions. You can tell your kids if they're going to be on their phones or if they're not going to be on their phones. You can have rules about where, when they're going to turn them in and what they should be doing. I think the comment about strict parents make sneaky kids, have sneaky kids, something like that. It's true, I think, to some degree. I mean, I've seen that to be true in a lot of ways. So it's a hard balance, and it's hard to say. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that no kid is the same as any other kid. They're all different, and they all need their own unique approach. And parents, I think, are uniquely positioned and equipped to help their kids. You know them better than anybody else does, and can do a lot of good, positive things to help them. But sometimes parents are afraid they don't know how to handle those situations like Matt was talking about, and trying to reach out to ask questions, get insight, get advice from people about what you can do to deal with a difficult situation with your child, to manage those kind of circumstances or situations. Just to give sort of a quick little anecdote experience that I had is I had some kids that were really struggling with truancy and attendance in a particular family, and I saw them every couple of weeks for more probation violations for missing school and not being at school. And just shortly before, at a hearing that we had, I didn't know what else to do. I'd tried every tool I knew how to use as the judge to try to encourage these kids to go to school. And so I asked the parents, I said, what motivates your kids? What gets them to do anything? And the mom piped in and said, well, the only thing that seems to make a difference is if I take her phone away. And I said, well, have you tried that with if they're not getting to school? And they said, well, no, we haven't really tried that. I'm like, why don't you guys try that? If they're not going to go to school, then have some standards and rules about what that looks like, and if they're going to lose their phone privileges or things like that. And I haven't seen them since. I haven't seen them, so I don't know if that's what made the difference. But I can say it probably did, because a lot of times the kids have their phones in their rooms and they're not sleeping at night. Then they don't want to get up in the morning, and then it's hard to get them to school. Or just simply the motivational factor that if you don't do this, you don't get the time to have these interactions that you want to have in a reasonable, appropriate way, can be very motivating for kids. And so, parents being empowered to fill that role and to take that position. And Matt and I were talking a little bit earlier today about the panel and what we might end up be talking about. And one of the things that comes up, sometimes a kid will go buy their own phone, and they'll save some money, or they'll get one from somewhere, and then parents are wondering, well, can I take this? What can I do? It's their phone. It is not their phone. Kids in Idaho do not have a right to own property. Their parents are responsible for those things. So even if they paid their own money, however they got their phone, you as parents can tell them whether they get to use it or don't get to use it. You get to make those decisions and you get to help them make those decisions. And I think helping them to learn how to use these things responsibly is very important. We as parents are all still trying to learn that as well, because this is new technology that is every day there's something new. It seems like I learned something yesterday about iPhone's eye tracking, and if you stare at the app long enough, it'll open the app for you without you having to click anything. I don't know, I didn't know about it, so maybe I'm behind the curve, but there's all kinds of new stuff that happens every day.
As we all pull out our phones and
Hey,
see
well,
what
let me
eye
try it.
tracking is.
It's on the new iOS update. I'm an Android guy, but in any event, I heard about it. So there's things that we're always trying to learn the new technologies and keep up with the new technologies. And I feel like if that's the game that we're trying to play as parents, and I'm a parent with teenagers trying to figure this out with my kids too. If we're always trying to play I'm going to be ahead of the technology curve, our kids will figure it out faster than we will and get around things that we're doing. And so I think another important factor here is having regular conversations with our kids and talking with them in a way where they feel like they can come to us, where they feel like they can talk to us, and where we're setting expectations for them and guidelines and rules, but we're open to discussing things with them and helping them and getting them through challenging, difficult things that they're facing, and helping them in general just to learn how to be responsible, kind of like the stranger danger thing, right? We've known to teach our kids, don't get in the car with the creepy guy with the candy in the van, and you know who not to get in the van with. And we teach those things to our kids. Well, we have to start teaching them how to be safe on the internet, how to be safe on their phones, how to take time to set down the screen for a minute and to do some other things as well, and to develop themselves in a well-rounded way. I think that's what I've got to add on that for now.
I think we would agree across our professions that each kid that we come into contact with is going to make some type of mistake online. And whether that's a big mistake or something small that's easily correctable. And what it comes down to is looking for connection, looking for a place of belonging. And it's a safety blanket. And we talk to kids a lot of times when we give consequences, it's because of something that stemmed off of a phone. And when we take some of those privileges away, whether at school, whether at home, and then come back to talk to our students, to talk to our kids, they've actually, in some cases, said thank you. Thank you for giving me this boundary and giving me a moment to breathe and just to be at home or just to be in class. And I'm wondering if Officer or Corporal Johnson and Amy, if you can talk to a little bit about what our school district is doing in relation to our policies with phones in the classroom.
Take it away.
I was getting ready to hand it to you.
I know you were.
Our policy has changed over the last couple of years, so if I don't get it exactly right, you'll have to. I apologize in advance.
Or expectations may be a better word instead
So
of policy.
our district-wide expectations is that students don't have cell phones in the classroom. The classroom is a place for learning, and that's what the expectation is that they're working with others and learning in the classroom. And at New Horizon, we enforce that policy. So if a student has their cell phone out in the classroom, it's usually taken to the office and they get it back at the end of the day. That happens the first 2 times. The third time, it happens again, but then after that, they have to turn it into the office for the next 5 consecutive days. And they get it back at the end of the school day. And I'm pretty sure that's our district policy. And then I think the 4th time, they just can't have it at school anymore. We used to keep it for 5 days, I think, like even overnight. But I think we stopped doing that quite some time ago. And now they get it back at the end of the day and they can take it home. But that's the expectation, is that while they're in class, they're engaged and they're working and they're not on their phones, because it can, I'm sure probably everybody in here has an experience where you look at your phone and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, where'd the last 2 hours go? Because it's easy to just kind of get absorbed in there. And it is, I don't know if you guys have seen the research or any of the things where they put somebody's phone across the room and then they put them across and they put all the things on them and they just let it sit there and ding and their cortisol goes up and their heart starts to race and it's an addiction. And so it's hard and kids aren't super excited when you take their phones, but they do it and they get through it and they usually come back and they're like, that was so nice not to have it. And I have some kids that just put it on airplane mode because they don't want it going off in their pocket while they're in class, and it just kind of helps them. So every once in a while I have a kid that is like, nope, I'm not going to give it to you. And I just we talk about how school is kind of like a job, and if you're going to be there, those are the expectations, and how you couldn't get a job and show up without a uniform on and be expected to stay and participate like everybody else. And so most of the time we come to a common understanding and they leave their phone with me and head back to class, but it's kind of how we operate. What do you guys do at Century?
Well, I can speak to one area. Last year we had an incident that happened towards the end of the year, and a core group of the students that we had the incident with was in one class. And as I was pulling them out and interviewing them, as they're going back to class, they were texting what we were talking about, and it gave them a heads up of what I would be asking them next. Since that incident, the teacher that is in that classroom, she now takes all the cell phones at the beginning of class and locks them up. And she said that her attention rate and scores and everything else are going up. So that just shows if they can focus on something other than their phones, it's going to help a whole bunch. And it's going to help if we have something happen at the school that we can take care of it without being interrupted by their phones.
In your opinion, as a panel, what role do parents, school, and community play in not only educating but also safeguarding students about their online safety? And are there any specific programs that you're using or safeguards strategies that you've seen that are effective?
So, so I think one great thing about Bannock County, I think we have a great juvenile justice system. We all work great together. We're all in communication. We're always talking. We're always working together, including our parents. We do from time to time have that parent that is, no, not my kid. But all in all, we all want what's best for the youth of Bannock County, and I think that we work great together in educating them and all that kind of stuff with the social media and stuff.
We have a great IT department in our district that is really proactive in finding new technology to safeguard kids and new programs for teachers so that they can monitor what their kids are doing, new filtering software, new
Line-wise?
Line-wise, yeah. I'm trying to think of what that is called. What is that? Just like a safety, security. So Line-wise is a program that notifies administration when there's a safety concern online. And so depending on what level it is, like I've actually gotten calls from the system that like a live person saying, hey, we just got this notification that this kid is doing this. Like if it's an imminent something, like a significant self-harm or danger to others. And so they're really progressive about what they do and safeguarding kids online. That being said, the internet is ever changing. There are sites where kids can go to a site and it immediately puts them in a video chat with somebody random in the world. And there are sites, new sites every day that are coming. And so I think it's super important to, for live people, teachers, parents to be always monitoring their kids' online use.
I would just say, and I think this is true for anything that is important to us about our kids, if we don't teach them about it, somebody else will, and we might not like what somebody else chooses to teach our kids about, or the way that they teach it to them. And so as parents, I think obviously everybody here thinks that they've got a responsibility to do something. That's why you're here paying attention to this and trying to figure this out. I think as a community, We face challenges with the new technologies that are being invented, that we're adopting and incorporating into our lives on a regular basis. And so we have to, as a community, also take responsibility to try to make sure our kids are being safe and being educated and being informed in a positive way and in a productive way about how to keep themselves safe, because we can't sit and wait and let them figure it out, because then the internet will teach them about the internet instead of us having an opportunity to intervene in that and make a difference. Matt might have a good little analogy to add about how kids are learning things. I don't know. We talked about or just a cultural shift in how kids learn and how they absorb information now. I think most types of phones come with some sort of parental control software. I said I'm an Android guy, but the rest of my family's an Apple family, and so there's apps that you can use there, and my wife manages most of that side of things. But we put restrictions on how much screen time they can have and which apps they can open, and whether they can have certain social media apps or not. But we don't just leave it with that. We then take opportunities with our kids to have them give us their phone, and we know what their passwords are, and we can jump on their phone and look at things and see what's going on. And it's not that we don't trust our kids. It's not that we don't think they're great kids. But I guess I've been on that ICAC side of things with investigations and reports enough times to know that there's a lot of things out there that can happen to my kids that I won't know anything about if I'm not looking and paying attention and trying to be involved. And I think that shows our kids that we care about them and that we care about what's happening in their lives. A lot of times parents are worried, and the kids will say, "You just don't trust me. That's why you won't let me do this," or "That's why you're being so rigid with these things." And I mean, as a judge, I get kids saying things, "You're just that dumb judge," and they say some choice words sometimes on the way out afterwards. But I oftentimes will have them come back later and express some level of appreciation because somebody cared. And when their parents care about them, it makes such a difference for kids. And so intervening at that level and being involved, even if you don't know exactly what to do something. Be there for your kids, show them that you're involved and invested, and I think that will help start building that foundational relationship that they need in order to feel like they can come to you when something bad happens, when they don't know what to do next. So building those things is really, really important for those kids. And then the other thing that I'll say here is because I do a lot of the child protection cases in Bannock County, all of them, I get to see too that there are some kids that just don't have that. They won't have a parent that's invested in trying to help them. And it's not always because they got a bad parent, but maybe their parent is caught up in some things that they're trying to figure out themselves that's keeping them from being able to help their own children and help them get through these things. And so your kids are going to have friends or kids that they know at school. And you will have opportunities to help those kids as well. And so when you see opportunities to help children who may not be yours, taking those opportunities, when you can see those warning signs that those kids are struggling emotionally, that they're looking for that sense of connection and belonging. I think a lot of my kids in the child protection cases are the ones that are seeking that out. And if they can find a phone, they'll find somebody who will try to give them a sense of connection, and it usually is not in a positive way. And if you can help them with those things to give them a positive connection, a positive adult, a positive role model, it just makes such a big difference. And our kids spend so much of their time at school during the day that our teachers and administrators often end up being those people for kids. And I'm always appreciative to them as they do that and help our kids through challenging, difficult situations. And I always tell kids that come to court that are mad about the way their parents did something, they didn't like what their parents said, they didn't like the way the situation was handled, it just wasn't fair, and that's why I did what I did. I always try to explain this to them. Your parent is not perfect, and they're not going to be perfect, but they care, and they're trying. And kids, they recognize that at times. And that's true of our teachers and our administrators. They're not perfect. They're not going to get it right every single time. But they care and they're trying If we all have that attitude of we are going to make a difference for our kids and we're going to be invested and we're going to try and we're going to work together to help keep our kids safe, we can go really far in what we do to help keep our kids safe, to help put protections in place for them. And those protections will fail at some point, and when they do, to be there to catch our kids and to help them to deal with those circumstances.
To piggyback on that, as the microphone is headed to the next person, I had seen online and read a statement that said, your child is only as safe as their friend with the least restrictive access on the internet. And that was really profound and really connected with me as we let our students and our kids hang with others. And it really comes back to that teaching moment, because we're not always going to be able to safeguard.
You know, I think it's important to remember developmentally, adolescents are more prone to impulsiveness and they don't think about long-term consequences of behavior. So in my experience working with kids and families that have been engaged with online, particularly sexual content, inappropriate sexual content, is although the kids may have found it exciting at first and they're getting attention, almost always they experience shame and guilt afterwards. And it's very difficult for them to talk to their parents about that. One of the hardest things is to disclose to parents that we found things that their children have been sending or receiving through their own social media. And I think parents, that's one of their greatest fears. And so sometimes in my experience when we've had to disclose those things about what we found, parents' initial reaction to kids seems to be anger, frustration, when I think really their underlying emotion is fear. This is one of their biggest fears. And because they feel like this is out of their control, they go to anger to try to attempt to get control. And so they might take really significant steps to try to get control. Kids might feel more shame and guilt. They need to be prepared to have a conversation with their kids, but that's one of the most difficult conversations parents can have with their children. So I'm going to talk about a resource tonight, and one is, in our community we have a Safe Teen Assessment Center. It's called The Village. A lot of the families that get referred to the Village may come through law enforcement, they may come through the school, but families can also do a self-referral to the Village. One of the key things when we find that kids are struggling with inappropriate content on the internet or on social media is that we get a really good assessment of what the issues are. And the Village does a great job of working with families to understand what some of those risks are, what some of those needs are, and then trying to get them connected, the families and their kids, to the right resources so we can start to address these problems in a positive way. Yes, there needs to be consequences and things like that, but oftentimes we need to improve the relationship between the parents and the youth. We've talked about strict parents and those types of things. We had a counselor that worked for us who one of her favorite comments is, rules without relationship breeds rebellion. And so if we can help improve the communication and improve the relationship in addition to putting guidelines into place and getting families into resources in the community, then I think we can start to see that shame, that guilt be lifted off the parents or the kids' backs, but also parents become more confident. I think they become more empowered, as the judges talked about. They can let go of some of that anger and that fear that they experience. The other thing I'll say is, it used to be years ago there was lewd and lascivious conduct, and that was a sex-related offense, and that's pretty much all we would see in juvenile court. Now we're seeing other types of offenses, and we're starting to see treatment providers, not only in the community, but other treatment providers that offer psychoeducation courses, catch up to recognize that kids who are engaging in high-risk social media internet activity, we need interventions that are early intervention, and in some cases prevention. And so that's another place where the Village can help families get connected to some of those early intervention resources to hopefully address this problem early on before it becomes more serious.
And Kendra, as you speak, will you, or Dr. Westerhouse, will you also share a little bit about some of the signs that maybe parents can be looking for, where teens aren't comfortable sharing or children aren't comfortable sharing what's going on, but maybe we start to see some of the signs and symptoms.
Yeah. So one thing I was thinking about as I hear some of this conversation is just the research on parenting styles and kids with the best psychosocial outcomes. And the parents who are both, there's different terms for this, but like demanding and warm have the kids with the best outcomes. So really what Matt was just talking about, right? Where we have both that responsivity and that caring, as well as like, these are the guidelines. So that's the right way to parent. That's the way where we see the best outcomes, okay? So you can have those boundaries, you can be strict with rules while you also listen to what your kid says. So I really wanted to highlight that. Another thing I wanted to talk about is just the effect of modeling on behavior. So kids are watching you, and so if you're on your phone all the time and then you tell them they can't be, that's not going to be very effective, right? So I know some families that will set up a like charging station at night for all the phones to go. So they are not in kids' rooms, but they're also not in parents' rooms. It's good for your sleep as well, and so it's a nice idea to do. Judge Call mentioned the password sharing and things like that. I don't recommend that parents are monitoring like every single text message that their child gets, because I think of this like learning to ride a bike with training wheels, right? We put the training wheels on and eventually we take them off. If we're monitoring every single thing that comes through, we're never leaving their side with the training wheels. And so it's a developmental thing that happens. You may start that way when your kid just gets access to new technology, but you may scale it back while still having access if you have a concern. So I think that's a nice way to have a happy medium there. In terms of signs, it's going to be rapid changes in things are always things to look for. These are some of the same things that are symptoms of like depression and things like that. But if a kid who was previously functioning at a certain level has a sudden change in sleep, grades, hygiene, how their mood seems, that's always a red flag. And we may not know exactly what the red flag is for, but that's a sign to ask more questions of the kid. There's a lot of support too for having that time daily to kind of visit with kids, family dinners, things like that, and just asking these open-ended questions. This very much ties back to what I'm saying about being approachable about things. If that's just built into a normal part of your day, kids may feel more like they can say something.
Can you give some examples of those open-ended questions?
Yeah.
Conversation starters?
Yeah, so some might be things like, what was your greatest achievement today? What was the biggest challenge today? Are there any concerns you have for your friends? Are there, we can kind of use a side door with friends to say like, any concerns you have for your friends, anything you need me to know, right? A big part of that too is the history of reactions that parents have. So if a kid has said something and a parent's like, oh my goodness, we have to take care of this right now, and it feels very punishing, a kid is going to be less likely to say something in the future. Right? So how we react to anything that a kid trusts us with will inform how much they trust us with in the future. So I give a few questions. I can give a ton, but yeah, some of those things.
I'll add something. Is that all right? Can I add something? Going back to what the judge said, this is a great event. Just this alone, I think this is, how do we get this out? It's educating, right? It's educating our kids. It's educating. I can't. I watch my task force, law enforcement sworn, go out and arrest people, and they're arresting evil every day. I watch this happen. I watch these arrests these guys are making, and it's like this is the most righteous thing that we can go after in law enforcement in my mind. This is it, and I think I don't like to use the word scare tactic, but no kidding. On the other end, somebody bad is doing something with whatever they're doing on the phone or on the internet. And I think that for me, with my children, like they understand what I do, and I think it's important that I don't hide it from them. This is what's out there. This is the real dangers that are out there. Right here in East Idaho, all across the state, it's happening. It's probably happening with people that you know, maybe you don't, but it is much more common than we think. And so I think that is absolutely just educating them on this is dangerous stuff that it can be. I'm also, kind of impressed that, recently, if you saw like Instagram or has put in some automatic updates that kids can't opt out of. There's some things that these social media sites are doing. I'm headed to Wisconsin on Sunday to meet with all of the commanders in the country, and they talk with different social media sites that try to figure out how they can also be part of the solution, right? Instagram, Meta, Facebook, they're trying to figure out what can they do to also help. Meta's the #1 reporter to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, but in Idaho we see Snapchat, right? But Meta's it. They're reporting, Instagram Direct, Facebook Messenger, they're reporting all of that stuff. So again, I think it's really boils down to educating, and this is great. What a great opportunity this kind of stuff of getting parents, schools, law enforcement, everybody involved.
So I'm glad you brought up the Instagram change that just happened. That was 2 days ago. I think the timing is not coincidental because there's some federal legislation that has been pushing forward, the Kids Online Safety Act, and it just had a hearing in the House, which is the chamber it has yet to pass yesterday. So one day before Instagram comes out and says, well, this is what we're doing. But things are trending in the right direction, right? So that Kids Online Safety Act really it passed the Senate 91-3, I believe. So it was like really strong support. Now they're going through the House process. There's a lot of rules around that bill, and I won't get into like the nitty-gritty details, but something may pass federal legislation that it has more safeguards. It's trending in that direction. Instagram, this really huge organization coming out and saying, we're doing this, is a sign of that, right? Take advantage of the things that are there for kids and realize that there are ways around them. Both those things are important.
Corporal Johnson and Amy, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about CTEL now, and then if we can talk in kind of twofold, and how does the reporting play into, what legal responsibilities do parents have in monitoring their children's? We've seen that in our nation, a trend towards parents being held accountable for their children's choices. And so what responsibilities and legal things do they have in that, but also the reporting part for kids?
So CTEL now is just an anonymous tip line that parents or students or anybody can call into, and then they call and notify whoever is appropriate to notify. It's just something that we started doing as a district. And then I'm going to turn it over to Judge Call to talk about the legal implications for parents.
All right, I'll give the lawyer disclaimer. I'm not your attorney. I don't represent you, and I can't give you legal advice. But no, joking aside, I said this, I think this week again, to a parent and to a kid. Your kid did something that got them into court here and into trouble, but you as the parent pretty much are on probation now too, because your kid's got all these conditions and all these things you got to deal with. So while our children are minors, we generally are legally responsible for our children and their actions. At a national level, we've seen parents who've been charged criminally for their children's actions in school shooting events and things like that. That's starting to happen in different ways, whether it was they knew something and didn't do something, or they actively assisted or aided, allegedly actively assisted or aided the child in the event. But that's starting to happen more frequently, so it's not so easy to just say, well, I didn't do it. That has sadly happened at times. But the other legal issues that you can run into is if your child causes some type of financial harm to somebody, generally you as the parent will be on the hook to try to address and deal with that, whether through some type of civil lawsuit or claim or through criminal restitution if there's a criminal charge. When kids get into trouble, they end up on probation a lot of times, or with incarceration or fees associated with those things. High levels of treatment that require costs and expenses, and probably just like in medicine when it comes to mental health or to helping kids avoid delinquency, prevention probably is a lot cheaper than dealing with the problem later. So being invested and involved in helping your kids earlier is probably a lot more effective. I mean, kids can run into issues if they're charged with certain crimes. I mean, until a few years ago, if a child were to, so sexting is a big thing that kids do. They take pictures of themselves, send it to other kids, usually a boyfriend-girlfriend type situation. But that often ends up getting shared further and further and further. And when kids participate in that type of thing, there is an Idaho statute that addresses it on more of the smaller scale, in a less severe way. But for a lot of years, we didn't even have that. And a child that committed a crime like that was effectively committing the same level of crime that the ICAC team looks for and prosecutes. And those carry significant potential penalties, both at the state level and at the federal level, and things including registration as a sex offender and things like that. And so there's a lot of really challenging outcomes that kids can end up having to deal with. And as Matt indicated a second ago, adolescents tend to be impulsive. And they don't always think through the consequences of their actions. And so being preventative with your kids, helping prepare them, advise them of the dangers and risks and all those sorts of things is very important. Then again, bring it back around to the point of the question, you as parents then end up getting to deal with the consequences of that, of, what does it mean that my kid has to register now as a sex offender, if that were something that were to happen. So the child may have some lifelong consequences that they have to deal with, or longer term consequences that they might have to deal with. And the parents may have those as well as you're trying to raise your kids and help them even into young adulthood. I always get nervous about the scare factor because sometimes that discourages kids or parents from coming forward when they don't know what to do. I don't say any of that to discourage anybody from seeking help or trying to figure out, hey, how do I help my kid? What do I do next? Or from discouraging kids from coming forward and saying, hey, I need some help. It always gets deeper if they don't get help. It always gets worse if they don't get help. So the sooner you get the help, the better off things will be in the long run. And it isn't going to be easy. And like Matt said, some of the conversations you'll end up having will be the most difficult conversations you'll ever have to have. But it's better to have them earlier than to wait and try to ignore the signs or to just not pay attention and to have a much bigger problem to deal with later.
Anybody? Tonight we've talked about the role social media has played in our students, in our children's lives. We've talked about some of the signs and symptoms that we see, the resources that we can use, and what our job is as a community, as a school, and as parents to help support our students and our children. And I just want to, as we end, we'll open it up for questions, but I also want to give everybody an opportunity, anything that I didn't ask and that you would like to share, or a resource that you would just like to remind our listeners about.
Well, I talked about an important resource I see in our community already, and that's the Village. And this is, I think we're located at 345 North 5th. We have wonderful staff there, and I think for parents that are feeling overwhelmed, you're dealing with stress with your kids, even if it particularly related to the topics we've discussed tonight, as the judge said, sometimes law enforcement may need to be notified or called just based on the extent of the nature of the problem that's going on. But the Village is there to be a resource to help families. And I find that parents, when I talk to them, they all have a desire and hope for their kids to do better, feel better. And when we focus on that motivation, we find that they really engage in trying to say, whatever I need to do to help my child, I'm willing to do. So we've got great resource here in our community called the Village. They can get people access to the right levels of resources based on those assessments. So we're grateful to have that. We've only had it really for a little over a year, and they've already served a lot of families, and I think they're very responsive, non-judgmental, and try to really help families get connected to the right resources.
Yeah, so I refer to the Village as well. So they have a ton of resources. They have a lot of expert knowledge, and they work really closely with, well, they are part of probation, but they work really closely with probation as well. But we have a lot of community resources too. We have Health West in our building and in a lot of our secondary and elementary buildings. So we've got counselors in-house along with our school counselors, and we just work really closely with juvenile justice, and I think we've got a great team. We work really closely with our SROs too.
And I think that us, the school resource officers, is a great resource for the community too. My office is always open. I'm willing to sit down, talk to parents, and try to brainstorm and help them with what's going on with their kids, because I'd rather see their kids succeed than end up with Matt. So. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want them there.
I think if you're curious about your kids' online use or use in social media or apps or things like that, like get yourself an account and see how they work and see what comes up. That's a really helpful tool, is to just be very aware of what's going on, right? You can then talk with more authority about what guidelines are going to be useful with a particular type of social media, what to look out for, when to come to you. So I think that's really important. Since I alluded to and Amy talked about Health West being in the schools, I'll mention that we have 6 therapists who are in 11 of the school district schools, going from elementary up through high school. We're not in every school, but we're in many. And in those schools, we're able to provide counseling where kids can stay at their school, miss less school time, and really get the counseling they need in that setting where a lot of these things are coming up. So that's a nice partnership we have with the school district, and it's really been successful so far.
We've got a great partnership with the Pocatello Police Department and agencies in the area, but certainly if you have a child that is being targeted, that there's you believe there might be a predator attempting to, upload, download, exploit your child, please, please, please reach out. I promise I've got a team of investigators that will relentlessly pursue them. We've got prosecutors that will definitely relentlessly prosecute, and we'll go after it. So, yeah.
One of the slides that I really liked that you shared today was that talked about all of the different types of things that could happen online, not just of the sexual nature. And I'm wondering if you can summarize those for us again, just as we're closing tonight.
Yeah, I mean, there's the sky's the limit as far as what people are doing online, right? There's people that are creating false accounts and fake profiles. Even if, as a parent, if you have a child that is possibly chatting with somebody and you don't know exactly who it is, but you have even a username, please let us know. If we need to help, we can step in and oftentimes get that kind of stuff. The internet providers, these are helpful for us. We can get to them and they respond to us. So yeah, tactics online are endless. Catfishing, blackmailing, whatever. Those are all things, scams, the sextortion stuff, all of that.
And the access to illicit items and the drugs that we see, and getting the vapes, and just kids being very unkind to each other. It goes very deep, and they use these platforms. One of the things that's been amazing that our school district has done is put Chromebooks in the hands of kids, and it's really helped us to be able to teach about technology. And with LineWise in place, we've helped to teach them how to use it appropriately, but it's something that goes home with them as they get older, and so it's something that's monitored. One amazing thing we did in partnership with Kind Community this week is we brought in a gentleman by the name of Tanner Clark, and he talked about the 1 second of strength. He has an amazing TED Talk that's out there it just was about being present in the moment, taking that 1 second of strength to put the phone down and be present in the moment. On the TED Talk, it really talks about parents doing that with children and putting the phone aside just to take that one moment of strength and be present in the moment, but also with students. And whether that's in your academics, 1 moment of strength to ignore the phone and to be present, or with your friends, or, what are some other things that you saw from that when you were listening to his presentation? He spoke last night with parents as well.
He just talked about his own kind of struggle and being unmotivated, and then what kind of changed for him, and just gave examples. And I don't know, I liked his energy and just being present, really, and his focus on just looking up and getting out of social media and kind of getting out of your own head and getting out of your own way.
Yeah, and it was pretty impactful for kids. It was probably one of the bigger assemblies that we had, that kids were able to really talk about what that connection to 1 moment of strength, and maybe even going home and talking with your kids, your high school kids, about what does that look like in our family? What does 1 moment of strength look like, and how can we use that in a variety of ways in our family? Yeah. Anyone else here have anything to share? Okay, we'll open it up for some questions as we have just a little bit of time left. Anybody has thoughts or questions? I know you shared about some resources that are kind of combined for like 3rd through 5th grade, middle school, high school. How do they access those? Yes. Or request those?
Yep. So if you Google search Idaho ICAC Task Force website, there's lots of there's links there. We can send you any of those presentations, pamphlets, swag, pens, you name it, we've got it. We can send it to you. Happy to share it.
I wanted to connect people, so the CTEL Now resource I wanted to show while we have people, because we have people watching online and then
Yeah,
the parents here.
absolutely.
So a resource doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to connect to it. So we've been trying to add lots of different resources to our School District 25 website, which is sd25.us. So if you come here and you go, you can see this Talk to Us. And that is just our general inquiry. I have a concern. We were using this kind of as a reporting tool because we didn't have anything else at the time. However, this is now just report a general concern. You can click on this. Let's see. Yeah, it is a little slow. And we have pop-ups for important things. Okay, so you can come here and you can say, what topic would you like to select the location related, so this can go to any school. And those come to me in my communications office, as well as my assistant, and then they go to the administrator of that school. That way I'm constantly monitoring them. So if there's a critical need, we can address those really quickly. But these are just, I have a concern about my lunch account. I have a concern about this interaction between students. We get all sorts of inquiries on this form. Now that we are doing CTEL Now, you can come back up here and you can see this. These two things live on every single page on our district website. So CTEL Now is that I saw something that I don't like. I'm really concerned about it. It's an imminent threat. This is where I can go to report that. It's anonymous, and it goes to an administrator of that school, and it goes down the line. And if an administrator doesn't immediately respond, it will go directly to dispatch and the police. So it's a really great tool. Tanya, did I miss anything on that?
It's an app, it's a phone number, or it's online. So you could do it. There's an app on iPhone and Samsung that you could have it on your phone. But this is where, it's 24 hours. If a student heard something, seen something that's imminent danger, we want to know right away.
Oh, and then Tanya wanted me to, one more thing. While we're talking
We
about
can give you
resources.
all the things.
While we're talking about resources, so if you go to Find It Fast, this is also available from our homepage, but Safe Schools. If you come here and click on that, then it will take you to our safety page. And this talks about all of the Idaho standard command responses for schools, really an educational, so parents understand what's happening in our schools when we go into a different thing like hall check or lockdown evacuation or reverse evacuation. It has our annual safety reminders that we published last week. And then it also connects people to both mental health awareness resources and fentanyl safety resources, and then strategies for safeguarding social media. So lots of resources that we can connect parents to here. This mental health awareness, I'll just show you this really quick. It goes from immediate support to, should your child talk to a counselor, what are you looking for? If you know a child who is struggling and then needing help getting started, warning signs of suicide. So we're trying to build out these resources for parents as much as possible. So just wanted to show you that.
Are there any questions that you have while we have our panel here? Yeah. Of course.
The resource that you're talking about, and having like those resources, is there a wait list for them?
This is going to be interesting. We'll do some bouncing.
In terms of meeting with staff at the village and starting a screening process, they will get you in usually right away. And so families can show up or they can call the village. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 until 5. I think our phone number is 208-417-5020. And so getting sign language from the village people, as we call them. So our village staff. So some of the resources, we want to match the resource to the level of need. And so there are some more intensive resources where there's going to need more assessment. There might be a little bit more of a wait list there. The village has done a great job of developing relationships with providers in the community to where we're able to expedite getting them into services. And so that's one of the advantages of going to the village is we've got those relationships with providers where a lot of times we can get families into a more intensive assessment and potentially clinical services if needed, sometimes within a week to start that process. They also do a good job of assisting families in that in terms of making the calls, doing what we call a warm handoff. So it's not just sending you over and saying good luck, but they stay connected with you, help you navigate that, make sure you're getting the help and resources that you need. There's other resources that we can help get families to that are really online. So I know we've talked a lot about online risk, but there's online benefits as well. And so there's some online resources we can help families get connected to that provide some of the what we call psychoeducation, but really the importance of educating parents on things that they can do, also educating youth on the risks and how they can engage in more safe participation in the internet and those types of things. And so I would say one thing the village has done is really effectively cut down really length of time from a contact from a parent to getting them into a resource or getting them connected with a resource. No, well, I think we're actually, I think it's 6.
About 6.
Yeah.
We've worked with kids as young as 5.
So. Yeah, and I think what Amy's asking about is there's a crisis center in Idaho Falls, and the one in Idaho Falls is called Rise Up, and there's times that we've contacted Rise Up, but again, that's the whole point of the village is to connect with families that have questions or need help screen for what that is, and then get them connected to that right resource. And they're continually learning the resources, but I'll tell you that they're some of the most knowledgeable people about what resources exist in our community. So, does that help?
Can you speak to it all specifically with online monitoring in children, the Life 360 app, and what your experience, if that's a good resource or not a good resource in terms of monitoring our children online? If anyone has experience with that. I've just seen it used by parents and friends, and
I haven't used that specifically. I've heard of people using it. I've had parents in cases talk about using it with their kids and in their families. So I can't speak specifically to that app itself or program. I guess I just would say whatever tool you're using, a tool by itself is not enough. You have to have that relationship you build with your kids so that they can talk to you and you can communicate and coordinate with them. And nothing will be foolproof. The internet is full of workarounds and ways to figure out how to get through things and do different things. And if somebody wants to get to something, they'll figure out a way to do it. It's more for protecting against some of those accidental issues that might come up and just trying to give some shield, I guess, a little bit. But I think whatever you would choose to use, something would be good because otherwise it's the whole world right there at their fingertips and they may not be ready for it. But it's like, I liked the bicycle example. We want to teach them how to ride the bike because someday they're going to turn 18, buy their own phone, move out of the house, and then they have the whole world at their fingertips and they're trying to figure it out without having learned anything up to that point. So it's there's not an easy answer, and I wouldn't say that I know of one specific program that's going to work for everybody, for everything. But having something is a good idea, and then working on that relationship with kids and trying to connect with them and trying to build those things. And the other part of all of this that I am reminded of every single day is it's frustrating, and it can be very exhausting trying to keep up with all of this and trying to help your kids and work through all these things. And so don't quit, don't give up, keep going, keep fighting for your kids, keep fighting for your family, and just keep going. And that persistence and that care and that effort will make a big difference, I think.
Thank you all for coming tonight, by the way. I'm connected to all these people in some way, shape, or form. But I just wanted to reiterate ditto on everything. But last night, Tanner Clark spoke to parents, and it really like was foundational to me because I speak to parents quite a bit after they're in trouble, and that's awful. But he really spoke to no cell phone should ever be in their room and should never be in the bathroom. And that really spoke to me. Like, there should be no reason that as anybody's ever given me why those kids should have their phone all night. They talk about cell phones, they talk about, alarms and so forth. I'm telling you, you can buy an alarm clock and it'll be worth their life. And then his big question was, when is old enough to give your child a cell phone? And they said, when you're ready for them to question their self-worth, when you're ready for them to experience possibly anxiety and depression and all of those things, you better be ready to be able to have that conversation and real conversation and connection and communication with them. So that was really eye-opening to me. I feel like I was the helicopter mom with a good relationship, and it still happened to my daughter. And that's where they're not safe, and we have to be involved. And so that was really impactful. All of the kids that we see that get in trouble is those phones inside of bathrooms or private areas. And how hard is it for a kid that doesn't have their whole frontal cord completely developed until they're 26 boys and 24 girls to make good decisions? It's hard. And so I think that was just really impactful just to think about those things.
And I would say along with phones is also Chromebooks, right? Having a charging station for both of those. Sometimes we associate Chromebooks with academics, but there is still ways to use those Chromebooks. Kids are smart. They're very smart. And so I would say for the both of those.
Sometimes it's easy to get tied up with cell phones because that's what we can see, and we know kids can access the internet with cell phones and computers, but they can also do it with their gaming systems. So
Yes.
whatever PlayStations they have in their rooms and those types of things, they can access the internet and engage in a lot of the same behaviors that they would on their cell phone. So you might have them turn their phone in at night, but if you leave them with a gaming system that allows access to internet, they can get into many of the same options that they would if they had their cell phone. So they find a way, but I think we've got to make sure we're maintaining close monitoring supervision of those gaming systems as well.
And truly giving the tools and the tips to them so that they can grow with the things that they do have at their hands. Well, I thank you for all coming. Thank you to our panel and for Kind Community for hosting this with us. Have a great night.